Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Contact Tracing 101, Supporting Employee Safety and Privacy through Insight Connected Platform. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few items regarding this webinar platform. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a handful of widgets, mainly the Q&A widget, which you can utilize to submit any questions you have throughout today's webinar session. My colleague Stephen will be monitoring the chat and answering your questions there. We'll also save a few questions for our presenters to address at the end. For viewing purposes, you can also expand your viewing window by clicking on the icon found on the top right corner of the slide viewer. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. And lastly, please do take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. At this time, I'll turn it over to our presenter, Ali Levine.
Thanks, Jen. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Contact Tracing 101, Protecting Employee Safety and Privacy with Insight Connected Platform. I'm Ali Levine, the product owner for Insight Connected Platform, and I'm joined here today with Ellen. Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am responsible for alliances within Microshare and focusing on Insight and Microsoft, actually, and working with you guys over the last few months to create our joint solution. So I'm delighted to be here. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Ellen. So today we're really talking about the challenge around how can we help prevent the spread of disease at work and make employees and guests feel safer about returning on site. COVID-19 has brought so many businesses to a standstill. Without effective means to encourage proper social distancing, organizations really lack the confidence to bring employees and customers back to the workplace safely. So one strategy is stay home, continue to work remotely, but not every organization has that ability. Certain industries like manufacturing, energy, healthcare, and education really require staff working on site to function, potentially in close proximity to one another. There's a huge opportunity cost associated with shutdowns, loss of revenue and profit, unemployment, lost customers, bad PR. So for organizations that do have to bring people back on site, protecting employee safety to the greatest degree possible is absolutely critical. Ellen, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen when talking to some of your customers?
Sure. So when we first started this, this solution wasn't really a thing before March. And customers came to us with, trying to get ideas about how they should go forward. And at the beginning, we thought, this is like a 2 to 6 month problem. But now it's looking like it's going to continue for at least another 18 to 24, even 36 months from now. So people are looking at what kind of investment is realistic to make to create these safe environments. And a lot of people are turning to technology and specifically to the data to figure out how they can analyze what's going on and make better decisions going forward. So looking at how can we use technology to make decisions is what most people are kind of looking for right now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ellen. So we have a question for the audience, for all of our attendees today. Which of the following safety measures are you looking at or do you plan to implement in your workplace? Give everyone a couple of seconds to answer that. While you're taking a look at that, there's really kind of 6 major factors that we look at around creating a safe return to work and play strategy. So if you've come to any of our other webinars recently, we've talked a little bit more in detail about thermal cameras and the daily questionnaires. But today we are going to be focusing on contact tracing, which hopefully you're prepared to discuss that as we come to this Contact Tracing 101 webinar. But what do we really mean by that? What is contact tracing? And before we dive in, hopefully everyone's had a couple of seconds to answer the question. I'm curious to see some of the results from the audience. Great, mask wearing, obviously 100%. Great to see that. Social distancing is up there, and a lot of you guys are all looking at contact tracing. So let's dig in a little bit more into the details then. Ellen, can you tell us a little bit about some of the history of contact tracing and what it really is when we mean that, or when we say that?
Sure. Contact tracing is not a new concept. It's been around for decades. And what it is basically is a mechanism to determine infectious disease spread through a community. So the idea is that when you find someone who has symptoms or a diagnosis, then you go back and find out where, other people that they have been in contact with through an incubation period. So typically until now, it's really been done manually. And again, we're kind of new, it's new to us in the U.S., but many countries around the world have been doing this for many, many years. But what happens is when you identify a person who may have been in contact with a person who is infected, you can monitor their health and make sure they're safe, and then if necessary, do another round of contact tracing for them so that you can understand how disease is spreading so that you can create mitigating protocols to kind of contain that spread and become more safe.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellen. So now that we know what it is, how effective is it really? Turns out vary. The sooner that health officials can alert close contacts, the lower the risk of COVID-19 virus spreading further. Immediate testing and tracing can actually reduce transmission by almost 80%. But in the event that someone is positive for the virus, contact tracers then have to begin doing a ton of research to figure out who that person was in contact with during the incubation period, that time when they may have been contagious before showing symptoms. And then if a positive case is confirmed, finding the time and resources required to manually trace affected locations and individuals is often prohibitive and reduces effectiveness drastically with each day. So a 3-day delay in reporting reduces effectiveness by almost half, and a 7-day delay prevents just less than 5% of transmission. So that timeliness is really critical here, making it very effective. But not all health departments even have enough staff to do contact tracing. So the US alone has trained just about half of that original estimated 100,000 contact tracers that were required to effectively support manual contact tracing. And some states are doing a little bit better than others. Some states boast up to 90% of reports are acted on within 24 hours, but other states are less than 44% of reports acted on in this time frame. So while historically contact tracing has really been done by government agencies, because of this limited resources and that desire to return to work, there's really a growing need in the private sector with companies taking this on in their own hands. So in order to effectively bring employees back then, a contact tracing solution needs to be able to enable your organization to do a few things effectively. Ellen, can you kind of walk us through what sort of those 2 key pillars of a solution need to include?
Sure, exactly. Moving that contact tracing responsibility to the workplace requires that you identify contact events between people. So that you know how to go back and trace that person's activity, that person's contact. So, you identify the coworkers who have been infected, and then you go back and identify other people so you can notify them, first of all, because you want to make sure their families are safe as well. But then you can test them if necessary, monitor their health. But also there's another piece of it that is identifying the spaces that they occupy so that you can do a remedial deep cleaning if necessary. And also with a data-based system, you can also identify traffic flows and how people are social distancing. So it becomes an additional value of having data to do this contact tracing task.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. So when we look at contact tracing solutions, there's really a pretty wide variety of flavors that the solutions come into. The first branch, as we talked a little bit about, is manual versus digital. But then within digital, there's really a few segments here. Digital contact tracing solutions are kind of broken down into 2 main factors, case management and proximity and notification, exposure notifications. And then within that proximity tracing section, there's another branch between kind of the smartphone camp for proximity events and the wearable camp. Gartner actually has a really great market guide for social distancing, which is kind of a sister solution to the contact tracing space. And they talk about the solution space sort of in 5 key areas: Wi-Fi, tags and wearables, apps, non-Wi-Fi infrastructure, and video analytics. But they note that vendors providing those tags and wearable types of solutions really make up the largest group. And so we're really seeing kind of a market surge in that area. We'll break down each of these segments in more details in the next few slides. But I'm going to jump in a little bit to some of the manual contact tracing pieces then to start. So really kind of, as we mentioned, the burden of manual contact tracing really sort of falls primarily on state and local agencies with limited resources. But some of what we're seeing here is that there's kind of pros and cons in this area for manual contact tracing. Pros are around that kind of human connection that's established. So when a contact tracer reaches out to somebody who is exposed, they're able to sort of build that human relationship. There's been some really kind of interesting reporting on this to date. But from some of the limitations aspect, it relies so heavily on human memory and perception. Think to yourself, how accurate do you think you are in remembering how many people you came into contact with that day? How close were they to you? So there's a lot of that kind of human perception that it relies on to really be effective. And I'm sure, we can all relate to this. As the pandemic rolls on, fatigue sets in. It just becomes exhausting, both from the people who are kind of having to remember the people that they came in contact with, as well as the manual contact tracers who are doing this work. And as we mentioned earlier, any of those kind of factors then reduce effectiveness pretty drastically as each day goes on. So before we dive into some of the sort of digital contact tracing solutions, I want to take a quick poll from the audience. When it comes to evaluating or implementing contact tracing solutions, what are some of your greatest challenges or areas of concern? I'll leave this up for a few seconds to let people answer. And I think that poll will stay up. So I'm going to click into the next slide, but you should still be able to access that. So then when we really start to look at digital contact tracing, the first question is why? So Ellen, do you want to comment a little bit about that, kind of what we've seen in the market space here?
Sure. So we're focused on CDC guidance for making sure that we understand what the thresholds are and what type of monitoring we should be doing for contact tracing. And one of the things that's interesting about this, as the science progresses, the CDC guidance changes. And so sometimes, so initially it was, if you were within 6 feet of someone for 10 minutes, that constituted a contact event, and we would want to report that. They've since, in the last few weeks, have changed that guidance to say if you've been in contact with someone cumulatively for 15 minutes over a 24-hour period, that's what constitutes a contact event. So if you have the data in place, you can actually still use those same inputs to change the query, to go back and do historical evaluation or, improve your forecasting. So once you have that guidance and you understand what a contact event is, then you can progress cases against that. So from a case management point of view, that's, notifying someone that they're in a contact situation, and then also following up with them to find out and drill into all the contacts that they've had.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. So from kind of the next few slides perspective, we're going to start drilling in a little bit more into some of the different types of technology that can be used for proximity tracing and exposure notification solutions. So as I mentioned, there's really sort of the smartphone camp and the wearable camp. From the smartphone approach, that kind of includes the GPS and the Wi-Fi technology. Now, from the pro perspective, a lot of people already have smartphones, right? So there's a potential perception here that because it's software only, there may be a lower barrier to entry. People can just download an app. You can update that app pretty rapidly. But from some of the limitations aspects, what we've seen really is that a lot of the industries, especially the ones that are required to bring employees back on site, right? Those manufacturing, the healthcare, prohibit the use of smartphones in the workplace. So even, speaking personally from our own Insight offices, some of our facilities that have maintained that on-site working environment because they provide those critical IT infrastructure and sort of lab support aspects of IT, our teammates are not allowed to actually have their smartphones on them in the factories. They have to check them in their locker. So this is something that we can even kind of relate to ourselves when we look at this technology. There's also a privacy perception. A lot of the users may be hesitant to adopt smartphone technology due to privacy concerns, right? If you're anything like me, your smartphone is in your hand 24 hours a day. And so this is, there's that perception that if you have this app downloaded, that there's kind of that sensitivity around, is this tracking me all the time? So even kind of within the US, only 3 in 5 Americans have reported a willingness then to use one of those Apple or Google GPS contact tracing apps because of those privacy concerns.
And Allie, that becomes really important from a compliance point of view, because you need compliance across a broad range of the subset of people that you're evaluating to actually conduct a high quality, high integrity contact tracing exercise. So if only 60% of the people are participating, if you have a smartphone approach, you're missing 40% of the people.
Yeah, and that's really huge as it starts to reduce that effectiveness kind of with each limitation, each factor there. So the other alternative here then brings us into the wearable device approach. And that includes a couple of different types of technology: ultra wideband, Bluetooth low energy, near field communications. And one of the main pros here is that elimination of that privacy concerns associated with the smartphone approach. This is also really a great solution for workspace environments where cell phone use is prohibited, as I mentioned, because you can attach your wearable to your badge or to a lanyard or to a wristband, and then you can take it off at the end of the day, leave it in your locker, leave it in your car, leave it in your purse, and it's not attached to you kind of in the same way that your cell phone might be. A couple of kind of notables for each type of the technology. Ultra wideband is kind of known as being high accuracy, and BLE is really thought of as being sort of more cost and energy efficient. But when we look at some of the limitations around a wearable device approach, as I mentioned, some of the pros for the software or the smartphone approach is that it's a sort of a software-only solution. So when we are starting to look at wearable devices, some of the limitations that need to be kind of factored in is you do need to then invest in those devices up front. And in addition to really bring in sort of that second pillar of the contact tracing solution in order to support the wearables from the proximity standpoint, you then need to add in a strong front-end platform for administration and reporting. So, Ellen, I know that Microshare solution leverages BLE, for example, and you've talked about a gap in the marketplace, and we've kind of talked about some of the different solution aspects. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of how Microshare approached the solution and approached developing in this problem space?
Sure. So as we've discussed, the smartphones, we looked at smartphones, that's a non-starter for the reasons that we've already talked about. We looked at ultra wideband, but it is extremely expensive. And the accuracy levels are really overkill. We don't need that level of accuracy, to less than a foot of distance between people. So Bluetooth and BLE became really the best option. The sensors are readily available in the market. They are already certified. They're easy to integrate with all the other pieces that we need within the network and integration with the cloud. But the other part of it that's really valuable is they're very low power. So the batteries within these can last from 9 to 12 months for a replaceable battery form factor, and now we're up to 30 months for form factors with an embedded battery. So it's low cost, it's highly effective, and it can scale. So we can look at thousands of people within an organization. We can very easily make that happen. So I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of how we got to this and how we're going forward. So when we started this process, gosh, back in March, we were building on a system that we already have for asset zoning, asset tracking. So we have a system that tracks wheelchairs and infusion machines and other assets within a hospital, for instance, or pallets within a warehouse. So one of our Microsoft partners came to us and said, can you use that technology to track people? And so we developed the system within about 4 weeks. So we're now deployed in over 15 countries in a number of industries, which you can see here. So the important points about our system is that, we don't require a cell phone. We've gone through that. We made a decision at the very beginning about privacy concerns to make sure that we don't collect personally identifiable information within our system. So we want to make sure that everything is pseudonymized, so we track the MAC addresses of the devices, and then we feed it into our customers or our partners' solutions so that they can modify and monitor that mapping between a personal name and a device behind an identity protection system. So whether it's Azure Active Directory or whatever the customer is using and whatever connected platform is using, all of that information is regulated by a customer so that only the people who are supposed to have access to that mapping information have it. And that's how we protect personal information and make sure the system is secure. We only track within a workplace. So the idea of tracking you in your personal time, knowing where you're going outside of the work environment, you take all of that off the table. And we also run in a separate network from the corporate network. So we don't have to tap into an existing internet or intranet, so that there's no way that someone could break into a corporate internet from our system or from our devices. So let's go through a little bit about how it works. So as I mentioned, we have these off-the-shelf beacons for employee badges. We've got lanyard form factor and a key card form factor, and those are assigned to individuals. Within the space, though, also, as you'll see on the far left, we have location beacons, which help, they broadcast a signal that says, I'm here, and these employee beacons will pick up signals from other employee beacons and those location beacons as well. And so as those are collected and in a manner that identifies a proximity event, which again is a variable threshold. So it can be, as I mentioned, 10 minutes within 6 feet. You can make it 15 minutes within 6 feet, or you can make it a cumulative of 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. We collect all of that data on the card. And then there's a device that is located throughout a space called a wave device, a wave scanner, which then will pick up the data that's collected on these employee badges and send it up to the cloud. So we typically operate through a LoRa gateway, and that data is then collected through that LoRa gateway. You can see on the moving to the right, and then it sends it up to the Microshare smart network into the cloud. At that point, we send that data into a client tenant or a partner tenant. And so it's very important that we have a good partner who has an interface that can collect that data and interpret it and display it correctly. So again, here's a picture of the form factors. As I mentioned, we have a key card device, which has this is the one with a non-replaceable battery, but it has a lifespan of up to 30 months. The smaller round sensors there are, those are replaceable batteries, and their lifespan is about 9 to 12 months. So again, as I mentioned, we talked about those first few components on the left. What we need is a good partner who has the capability to take the data that we're generating, interpret it, and feed it back into a customer to give them the single pane of glass interface that they're looking for. And we've chosen to partner with Insight and the Connected Platform for all the reasons that I've identified, but because they have a tremendous platform that gives a way to collect information and assimilate it and analyze it and forecast it that meets our customers' needs. So, Ali, tell us more about that.
Sure. Thanks, Ellen. Oh, one slide too far. There we go. So we kind of took a deep dive into Microshare Smart Network and those devices. But let's take a step back for a second and kind of take a look at what we can enable then with an end-to-end solution across Microshare Smart Network plugged in and integrated with Insights Connected Platform. So we are able to then combine the wearable technology from Microshare to provide that proximity tracing that we talked about, and that's kind of the one half of the solution. And then the device assignment and case management from Insight Connected Platform to deliver the other half of that solution to really enable that end-to-end digital contact tracing. So let's kind of walk through the stages of sort of the end-to-end user experience here. So wearable sensors all the way on the left are first assigned to each user, and that unique ID is associated with the device itself. And as Ellen mentioned, those unique ID to device or to user mappings then are stored securely in Connected Platform. Then, as people walk around the facilities, contact tracing events are logged when two people are within what we define as a close proximity, and that can be configurable. So default is within approximately 6 feet for 10 minutes, but we're able to change that based on hardware, firmware, and Connected Platform configurable thresholds. Then location events are also logged as people are walking around the facility and come into contact if you've added location beacons anywhere around your space. And that's then going to help those facilities managers really maintain your facility and keep it up to those high cleanliness standards to be able to really kind of keep employees on site in a safe and effective manner. And then finally, if there is a positive diagnosis, only then are those authorized contact tracers able to log in securely through the Insight Connected Platform and create case reports that then kind of map and marry that data between the people who are assigned those badges and the contacts that they may have created over a kind of specified period of time. So I'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the details here. So why did we build this onto Connected Platform? A little bit of background on Insight Connected Platform overall. Connected Platform is an extensible platform that was really built to manage those repeatable elements of the core frameworks that really we find in every IoT solution. So when we kind of boil IoT solutions down to the core pillars, it really kind of spans across these 5 pillars that we talk about as people, so the people that are on the ground interacting with devices, places, the places that they come into contact, or those remote locations where your devices are installed. Things, right? It's the Internet of Things. Dings, every IoT solution has sort of this expectation around workflows and rules and notifications. And then finally, insights. What can you do once you have that data into your sort of centralized platform? What insights can it derive for you? So we are able to then take that Insight Connected Platform across those 5 pillars and empower things like secure operational control through that single pane of glass. Connected Platform enables centralized management of your devices and locations in that single mobile app, that single pane of glass. We're able to then visualize and trigger workflows from any of those IoT data sources to drive rules and notifications and corrective actions. And then finally, we're able to then aggregate and analyze that data at the edge and in the cloud to deliver those true business insights. So whether it's looking at sort of analytics or in this case, really kind of combining that information into creating case reports. So let's dive a little bit deeper then into contact tracing within Connected Platform. So the Microshare solution provides the wearables, but as sort of is the case with any IoT solution, you're kind of creating inherently by solving a business problem, by deploying different devices, you end up sort of creating some additional challenges that then need to be really thought through and solved to really enable an end-to-end true user experience. So now that we're looking at managing these wearables for all of your employees across sites and potentially globally, that starts to pose a whole new set of challenges. So you might start to think, how do I actually get those devices to my employees and securely manage the device to user mapping? The creation of this registration role. So we've created this workforce experience within Connected Platform to enable registration users, or even supported through sort of a kiosk experience, to very quickly and seamlessly scan a QR code on the wearable device and assign it to to a user who's in your system. If that user is not in your system, maybe you have a guest or a visitor on site that day, we also have a very fast workflow to be able to kind of quickly add people on the fly. And that process takes a matter of seconds. Sort of a purely operational standpoint, you might start to think, oh gosh, now that I'm deploying hundreds or thousands of devices to the field, how can I manage them all? How do I make sure that the wearable that I'm about to assign is working and has a full battery before I assign it to somebody? And how can I be prepared maybe to replace the batteries if they all start to deplete around the same time? That really created the operations persona, which is kind of a core persona within the Insight Connected platform, sort of from an IoT management perspective as well. And that's really where we leverage our device intelligence to be able to quickly see that device status, whether it's a battery that's going from medium to low and you need to alert somebody to replace it. Being able to see, are my gateways offline, and being able to respond to them very quickly and reactive on a very timely manner to make sure that your system is staying up to date. Being able to kind of just manage your devices in mass across when you start to deploy hundreds of devices across your locations, potentially globally, being able to manage that all from that single pane of glass. And finally, the core sort of other half of the digital contact tracing solution that we've been talking about is how can I then securely create a contact tracing report in the event that somebody is diagnosed with COVID-19? And that really created that case manager role. So through that case manager role, we are leveraging our role-based access control with role-based permissions to ensure that only the people who are authorized to have access to this highly sensitive information are able to then log in and create a case report. And it's only in the event that a case report is created is that mapping from device ID to user, that pseudonym value, mapped from the device IDs to the users to reveal the information of who came into contact with each other or who came into contact with specific locations. So just kind of adding on to that then, there's a couple other sort of key factors that we really evaluate here. From a data privacy and protection standpoint, that's really sort of a core facet of making sure that everything that we build applies best practices for data privacy and control. So we have things built in. So we really only maintain the information for the time that it's required. So for example, that sort of raw device level proximity events or those device to user mappings that are the events that are sent from the Microshare system or the user mappings that we store in Connected Platform, those are purged on a regular basis to make sure that we're only maintaining the data in the system that we really need for as long as we really need it. So right now it's a configurable amount of time, but right now our default is about 6 weeks to be able to purge that data. And then the case reports, right, as I mentioned, the case reports are really the only time that we actually sort of do that mapping and expose that device to user mapping and really present that PII, that personal identifiable information. And so those reports, we allow users to export them through an Excel export function. And we only store that data in Connected Platform for 7 days. And again, that's a configurable number, but our starting point, starting recommendation is 7 days, just to make sure that we're only keeping the information in the system for as long as it's relevant and no longer. And that kind of covers the sort of the three kind of key experiences within the Connected Platform.
So Ali, I just want to point out that this is a very good example of why we chose to work with Insight and Connected Platform, because of all of the additional pieces of this process beyond the technology. So there is the communications with and communications and the dissemination and the deployment of the wearables. It's the change management. It's how do you make sure that everybody's comfortable with what we're doing. It's how do you make sure that the right reports are available to the right people. So it's more than just the data and the analytics. It's a huge part about the people process and making sure that all the personas within the whole chain of communication are well cared for and that all of their needs are addressed. So Connected Platform is a way, as you said, to incorporate all the best practices that we've learned from doing this for over 6 months into a consolidated single place where people can get all this information and have these experiences in a way that is meaningful to them.
Yeah, for sure. So that kind of leads us into kind of our next point. So with so many solutions on the market, why should companies choose this integrated Microshare and connected platform solution? We really kind of broke it down into the buyer perspective and the user perspective, but Ellen, I'll kind of let you dive into some of this here.
Sure. So, as I said, we built this system on top of a system that we already have in production. So it works. It works out of the box. And what we've done is we've taken all the complexity out of the technology decisions that you have to make, from which wearables or which sensors to procure, what network that you need, and how to interface it with an end user experience. All of that's done. It comes in a box. So we can be up and running in a new deployment within a week. So when the sensors and all the devices arrive, you install them. It's very simple. It's as much of for the location beacons and the wave devices and the gateways, you just plug them in. And assigning the wearables, there's a mapping exercise that happens within Connected Platform. So it's just up and running and it just works. But another point that we haven't really touched on is it really is disruptively cost effective. So we operate on an OpEx subscription model. So it's based on a small subscription fee per month for the whole entire solution. So you don't have to worry about ancillary costs and extra network and extra devices. Do you need to have enough backup for a hot swap if necessary? It's all included. So it's very predictable about what kind of expense you're going to have, and then also you don't have to worry about it changing. So if there's a new development in sensor technology, or if we have a firmware upgrade, that's all included in the single price. So as I mentioned, it's very easy to deploy. It's expandable. So this solution, contact tracing, is built on our Microshare smart network. So we have over 25 additional solutions that you can leverage to create safer back to work processes, or monitor space. We can talk about those in more detail. But it's occupancy, it's predictive cleaning, it's air quality, it's leak detection for areas or for spaces that aren't being used because they're not occupied because they're not back to work yet. So there's all kinds of different ways that we can use this data for additional analytics and start building a digital transformation solution set for even after we've resolved this pandemic challenge.
Yeah, I really wanted to highlight that point as well. The connected platform is expandable. So it's truly not just a one and done solution that is so vertically tailored toward this sort of detection and prevention market space. As we continue to build out the roadmap, connected platform was already meant to be that sort of extensible, scalable IoT platform. We had additional use cases before detection and prevention. And this is an example when we were able to very quickly add in a new integration through Microshare Smart Network. And we'll be able to continue leveraging that extensibility to add in additional use cases when hopefully the need for contact tracing goes away in the near horizon. We really also focus on putting the user first. So as I just mentioned with some of the core sort of application features, we really take a user-centric approach when we think about the whole product design. So how do we make it easy to deploy and integrate? That's a little bit of what Ellen just talked about, and that was a really key factor in us exploring our partnership with Microshare to begin with, is that it can be deployed very quickly. So from the deployment user perspective, it's a seamless solution that you can stand up in a very quick time frame. Then to folks in facilities who are wearing the devices, making sure that this is a seamless user experience for them, that it's just a small sort of non-obtrusive badge or chip that can be sort of looped into their lanyards. from the registration users being able to assign devices in a matter of seconds so that you're not making this huge sort of discrete flow of people coming into your facility and building up a big queue of people coming in during rush hour, through to the operations users and making sure that we're not sort of adding new problems to their day, that we're making it very easy for them to manage the solution. And at the end of the day, really building in that peace of mind for your employees and your guests when they come on site. So really being able to kind of keep the user top of mind was really kind of core from our sort of product design perspective. And it's something that we're really seeing as being appreciated by some of the folks that are using our product today. So Ellen, I know that a solution this innovative is really bound to get some attention, and Microshare has actually been in the spotlight a few times recently. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the experience that you've had from the field?
I would love to. We are so pleased that we have been focused in a number of publications. We were on the front page of the Financial Times a few months ago when we first started this. We've been highlighted in the New York Times on the front page a couple of times. We have some referenceable customers who are very pleased to talk about their experience with working with the solution. But one of the themes that keeps coming back is the value of the data. And it becomes the biggest surprise for most customers because they realize now that they have the capability to manage their environments and come up with better decisions based on data and insights that they get from it. So, they think that when they start, it's going to be a good idea, but then once they have data, they can ask new questions and their imaginations go wild with understanding more about what they're doing and how they're doing it. So one of the things they're also looking at is not even realizing what questions they have to ask now, but being able to go back and query historical data. So you can't go back and get historical data, but you can ask questions now about data that you've gathered in the past. So what they've realized is that they don't have to know everything that they're going to want to know in the future, but they need to start gathering the data now. So it's important to get started, and that digital transformation strategy is being built in very small steps. But it's important to get started and get that data collected so that you can actually understand more about what you're doing and go back and create new insights and better forecasts, better plans.
Yeah, and even from Insight's perspective, as I mentioned, some of Insight's own facilities are essential businesses that have been kind of kept open or had to reopen really quickly. So Insight is also interested in our own safe return to work. How can, we're really exploring how we can use technology, not just for our clients, but also for our own staff as well. And we've seen some really positive feedback on delivering on those outcomes of really sort of building and maintaining that employee safety, that feeling of safety, that feeling of confidence and trust in our businesses making the right and the safe decisions. So, Ellen, Microshare was really among the first to start repurposing your technology for wearable contact tracing. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned in the last few months that are important for folks to keep in mind as they're evaluating solutions?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, employee safety is of utmost importance. And it's not even working toward making sure we have safe environments, but making sure employees are safe and their families are safe. Because it becomes a much bigger community when you think about all the people who are impacted by this pandemic. Also, privacy, the importance of protecting personally identifiable information and make sure that people are comfortable with participating in the solution. And we've seen, once we understand how the technology works and what the limitations on it are, we're finding very high participation for organizations to make it voluntary. And of course, we have many who are, in factory manufacturing situations where it becomes a condition of entry into the building. But when it's voluntary, when people really understand what's going on, it becomes we have very, very high compliance. The event and location information is a lot more valuable than we first thought. So we have a couple of instances where our customers have actually changed their workflows or changed job descriptions because of the insight of of the data that they're getting. So in one instance, for example, there was a job role that required someone to contact multiple departments. So this person was always moving around from accounting to finance to operations, and it became very clear that they were potentially a super spreader just by virtue of their job description. So they instituted ways that they can isolate people a little bit more and sort of enforce social distancing from a programmatic or an operational point of view. They also have uncovered ways or identified how people gather. So, the number of people in a conference room, for instance, or the number of people who, are gathering in a kitchen during lunchtime or break time. So they're changing the ways that people move through the space, maybe assigning kitchen time or kind of creating processes that isolate people a little bit better. We've also realized that, the technology must work right away. Once someone makes a decision for implementing this kind of technology, they want it to work immediately. You don't have time to do a 2 or 3 month development process. And so that was part of the other reason that we decided to take all the friction and all the decision making out of the technology solution and made those decisions based on current industry best practices and available devices, so that you can have confidence that when you receive your deployment, you receive your shipment, it's ready to go. The use case, unfortunately, is probably valid for at least 18 to potentially 36 months. As I mentioned earlier, when we started this, we thought maybe it's, in 2 months we won't have to worry about this. But it's becoming clear, even with vaccine and other solutions, that we may be looking at this for a very long time. So it's a lot of our customers now are looking at, making that technology investment, but making sure that it's not just a one and done. It's not just one single siloed solution, that they're going to be able to leverage this technology platform for other solutions in the future. And again, choosing the right partner is critical. Looking at the capabilities of Connected Platform, it was a very easy decision for us to work with Insight and develop the system with them. And as Ali said, we're continually improving it. And so as we learn more and as we develop more capabilities within the platform, more features, and we get more feedback from customers, it just becomes better. It just becomes more robust and more useful for what we're dealing with now and what may come up in the future.
Yeah, organizations typically require 10 plus partners to successfully execute a digital transformation project. And so that's where, partnerships are really a key to enabling successful deployments and solutions. And that's where Insight comes in. And so Insight is what we call a super solution integrator. So for organizations that want to leverage new and increasingly sophisticated technologies to really drive those transformative business outcomes, the answer really comes down to an SSI, or a super solution integrator. So Insight has a global scale across 21 countries. We have over 3,500 partners, including our great friends at Microshare. Bottom line is we're a very large company. And so if the question really kind of comes down to then, how am I going to actually deploy and manage the solution across my global workforce? We have the coverage to be able to handle everything from scoping and planning and designing to procuring and deploying to coordinating those multiple vendors across different work streams, to centralizing and facilitating internal communications, testing and iterating to improve outcomes. Finally, aggregating and analyzing and leveraging that data that Ellen just talked about to be able to learn and continuously improve, and then managing those services as well. And finally, Insight really has a tremendous amount of award-winning capabilities. And one in particular that I'm going to highlight is our Worldwide Internet of Things Partner of the Year. So across our industry thought leaders and partners like Microsoft, and all of our capabilities, Insight really has strong capabilities across every aspect of transformative technology. So I think with that, I'm actually going to pass it to Stephen. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, and I want to give a little bit of time for some Q&A. So Stephen, are you able to join us for a Q&A session?
Yeah, absolutely, Ali. It looks like we got a couple good questions from the audience today. I think the first question that we had from the audience was, how does our software define like contact? Can we define that by the length of time, the distance, et cetera, for employees?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. So there's kind of two elements to this. Number one is from the Microshare smart network aspect of it. So Ellen talked a little bit about the BLE wearable sensors that kind of scan the data and transmit that. And that is configurable, but currently set to approximately a 3 to 5 minute for sort of a minimum contact. And then Connected Platform takes that data and then is able to create contact trace reports. So we take sort of that raw device level proximity event information and turn them into what we call a close contact. That close contact can then be configured as low as 5 minutes and up to as high as 60 minutes through the application itself. So if you want to sort of run different case reports to see sort of different exposure times, we provide that flexibility. As Ellen mentioned as well, the CDC is changing their guidelines. This is really new territory across the board, and that's really the beauty of technology, is that we're able to flexibly adapt to those changing guidelines. So CDC recently came out with a new definition of a close contact, where people can have sort of cumulative exposure that adds up to 15 minutes over 24 hours. And through our software, we're now able to kind of combine the raw device level proximity events to be able to aggregate that. And we'll soon be able to actually create those case reports based on that sort of new CDC definition. Ellen, anything you want to add to that?
No, again, it's the flexibility of having the data and being able to control those thresholds. And as you mentioned, with the 15-minute contact over a 24-hour period, creating that kind of a case management with a manual process is pretty much impossible, because you're not going to remember, well, I talked to this guy for 10 minutes yesterday and 5 minutes this morning. That would constitute a contact event. So the danger sometimes with the manual reporting is that you over-report. So, you may think that, because you talked to someone or you were in contact with them, 3 or 4 times over the last 24 hours, that constitutes an event, but it might not, because it might have only been, you might not have met that 15-minute threshold. So sometimes with the manual processes, you're in danger of over-reporting and maybe isolating people and not actually being efficient about your contact tracing protocol.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. Stephen, any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, another great one that we had come in. Someone asked, how far back should one go when performing a trace, and how does the working environment and length of time impact our definition of a close contact?
Sure. Yeah. So as I just mentioned, the definition of that close contact is something that we are allowing through the application to be a little bit flexible, so that we can allow our clients to respond and adapt to changing guidelines. Same thing really with the case report. So we will provide the data to allow you to adapt to your different environment or your different client-based, kind of configurations based on your team's legal guidance. So what we provide today, for example, is through our case management workflow, you can sort of create a case based on what we sort of refer to as patient zero, that diagnosed person entry that you're looking to see who came in contact with this person. That date, you're able to input a diagnosis date or a reporting start date based on up to 3 weeks ago. And then we keep records of the device level proximity events back to 6 weeks to be able to kind of create a report that can span up to 30 days. That's kind of just based on our recommended guidelines, but providing enough data to be able to allow clients to adapt flexibly to their workforce's requirements and to changing guidelines from things like the CDC.
Awesome. Let's see. Another question that we kind of had was, what does our pricing model look like if someone was interested in getting a quote for the solution for their organization?
Sure. Yeah. So when we look at pricing, as Ellen mentioned, it's really sort of that based on that subscription service. So we do have a very low per user per month software price, or sorry, kind of subscription price that covers the devices, the hardware, and the software, plus a base deployment cost. So if you're interested in getting a quote, please indicate that you'd like for us to reach out. We have a final poll coming up at the end of this webinar, and please indicate that you're interested in reaching out, and we'll have someone reach out and be able to work with you to create a quote based on your configuration and organization's needs.
Awesome, great, thank you. I think we have one more question. I think it's for Ellen specifically. Can you touch upon, we understand the need for contact tracing right now in this current environment, but what are some other solutions that we can build upon that going down the future?
That's a good question. I talked a little bit about some of the other solutions that we have. What we're finding is that air quality in getting back to work is becoming incredibly important. Humidity levels impact the spread of COVID-19. We also want to understand how spaces are used and how spaces are occupied. So we have a full occupancy solutions that for desks, for meeting rooms, for common areas, so that we can understand the flow and maybe, as I mentioned before, create mitigating processes and protocols so that people avoid collecting or spending too much time together. One of the other issues is, unused space. So humidity or leak detection or, some of the other evaluating a space that isn't occupied becomes very important as well. Water levels. A lot of times we've found out that unoccupied space without the water circulating through the pipes has a tendency to become stagnant and may develop a Legionella challenge. So we can monitor that as well. Predictive cleaning. So we want to make sure that our cleaning resources are deployed in places that they're required. You don't want to clean a space that hasn't been used. Then you also want to make sure that you are constantly cleaning and making sure that spaces that are commonly used or often used are disinfected and safe for the next people who come in. So that's meeting rooms, it's restrooms, it's kitchens, it's any area. We have solutions for all of that. And any of these are also, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, any of these are also relevant after, as the pandemic need for contact tracing is reduced, we'll still have the need and the useful data to manage space and how it's used in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellen. And just to add to that from a connected platform perspective, so our other use cases include additional detection and prevention use cases. So we're able to integrate thermal cameras and access control panels for that sort of entryway temperature screening. And beyond detection and prevention related solutions, we as well have the ability to integrate environmental sensors to enable things like temperature and humidity monitoring, whether that's for a restaurant or a food safety environment or a hospital or whatever the sort of end application is. And a little bit farther outside of the detection and prevention space, but just as far as kind of connected platforms, additional use cases and extensibility, we also have integrations with PLC devices for industrial remote asset management. So a little bit, less related directly to the topic at hand, but just in terms of kind of the full extensibility of the platform. So I know we are just about at time, and thank you all for participating and for asking amazing questions. If you are interested in learning more, please reach out. We can schedule a discovery meeting. We are offering pilot programs for a couple of kind of parameters. So 500 wearables, 3-site maximum for a 12-month commitment. Or if you're interested in just diving right into a full-scale solution, we are happy to engage in conversations around that as well. And our experts can reach out to start that conversation. So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all so much for your time. And please do take a moment to fill out our survey so that we can identify who we should reach out to who's interested in learning more. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm really looking forward to the next phases.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, for joining us today.
You bet.